Hello, my name is JoLina Lopez, and I will be presenting this marketing campaign that I have created for Star Care Specialty Health. So, a few things in this presentation, I'll introduce what Star Care is and desired outcomes, some information about the target audience, who's influencing the audience, integrating some theory, and then some context about the textbook and what tactics I specifically chose for this campaign. So, going into Star Care, hopefully you've heard of it before, but if not, Star Care is a nonprofit community center. It is the state designated local mental health authority. That is a lot of words to say. And it's also known as LIDA, the Local Intellectual Developmental Disability Authority for 5 counties. So these 5 counties are within this area. That's Lubbock, Lynn, Cochrane, Crosby, and Hockley County. So whenever anyone in one of these counties needs crisis, risk assessment, anything like that, they can go to Star Care Health. So their vision and their mission statement is we imagine a community where all people have hope and the opportunity to achieve their full potential. And then mission, provide access to a broad array of specialty healthcare services that support and empower people. So using the vision and using the mission, I tried to curate a message and kind of create a goal in mind where we can empower our community members, especially here in the local area. So Star Care for this assignment, I imagine it repositioning, so kind of shifting more from primarily an informational public presence to more relationship driven communication. And this would be rooted in co creation, meaning that we aren't seeing ourselves as influencing our consumer. Instead, we are working with community partners in order to empower our audience in order to give them this message of hope and health. So, the desired campaign outcomes, two things. One is to build awareness and trust in Star Care, and then to boost digital engagement. These outcomes I have created based on two of the goals from our actual packet of it was like our fiscal year review. So, two things to enhance the culture of hope and health. Hopefully, we can do that by building awareness and then community partnerships. We can do that through digital engagement since we see social media being such an easy tool to access today. So, for my target audience, I've done a lot of research into looking into the 5 counties that we actually serve. I have a whole notebook full of different notes, but what I found is other than Lubbock County, the other 4 counties are very rural. They're rural communities. And a lot of people who graduate from small schools in that area only have a high school education, and about 30% obtain a bachelor's degree. So I really wanted to focus on that education level as well as that audience because we know that there are students, Gen Z and Gen Alpha age, who are graduating from high school and entering the workforce. So my target audience for this would be digital natives who grew up with smartphones, who had access to internet, but they are younger. They did come from these rural cities, towns, but they do have access to technology. And there are a few different people who could influence their patterns. We have rural millennial parents. This is especially important for Gen Alpha, who may be younger, so they may not have their own income, so they are relying on their parents to get them services. And then Gen X, rural parents and grandparents, and then urban Gen Z peers. So, urban meaning city, what they see from people who do have access to healthcare readily because they live in a big city. And then educational institutions, in other words, schools. So, how can we work with the local schools to inform students and help them to know what services Star Care provides? Moving on to theory, I decided to use Johnston and Taylor's tiers of engagement because I thought about how I would present this to someone who doesn't know the marketing side, who doesn't know any of this, any of the communication, what I study. So, this theory in particular lays it out so clearly and lays it out in a way that is very easy to understand, but also shows you how that is growing and how that's kind of scaffolded, with tier one being activity. So, do we see people following us on social media? Tier two being understanding and trust. Are people trusting our services? Are they talking about it? And then tier three being action slash impact. Are they actually going to events that we're hosting? Are they actually recommending their friends to start care services? And then we reject tokenism engagement, just meaning that instead of having it all, we want to say one size fits all. No, instead we are prioritizing co-creation. So how can we work with our partners, with our community members? So based on those tiers, there are some different campaign outcomes. The first one from the first tier would be getting that engagement. So are people knowing like our social media handles? Are people mentioning us in the news? And then tier two is people getting to understand and trust Star Care. So community members, people from the different 5 counties, they understand our mission and they are building trust through our consistent messaging and the informative content. And then tier three is actual engagement, actual action, and actual impact. So engagement is achieved when they take action. They can advocate for mental health or refer others to Star Care services. So the visual tone and branding of this campaign would go a lot with, like, of course, visual wise, what we have right now with our star logo and our color scheme. But in terms of how we are talking to our audience, the verbal needs to be accessible. It needs to be authentic, genuine, and stigma reducing. So, a lot of times people don't want to talk about mental health, or we see people from minority communities who were raised to purposely not talk about it. And I know because I'm an example. So, we want to kind of change that idea. And it's hard. It's not something that's going to be achieved overnight, but by slowly having our brand out there, by having our name out there, people know, hey, it's okay to not be okay. And of course, with mental health, you get into a lot of jargon. So, of course, we want to avoid anything that may be too confusing or it's an acronym that no one understands. As for tone and personality, it needs to be mission driven and it needs to be empowering. I think StarCare's mission is so important. It's one of the reasons I get to work here now, is because I not fell in love, but I resonated with the mission. So I am so blessed to work for StarCare, but the way that we can frame it is that StarCare is a guide, it's an ally, not only just a provider or a service. So, going into my tactics, based on the textbook, the main two ones that I would really want to integrate would be public relations, of course, that's my department, but also social media and internet. So, starting with public relations, I think it's super important to get community engagement. So, engaging in sponsored events and making sure that people know our name. I know Star Care sponsors many events. They sponsor like a Veterans Day parade coming up in November. So those are different ways to build that relationship. But also news releases, press releases. So writing about what we're doing and making sure people know that that gets out there, that that's published. And then storytelling. I imagine that this campaign could have a lot of digital slash multimedia storytelling elements into it. So, collecting stories from people who work at StarCare, clients who are willing to share their experience with StarCare, and then any local advocates, anyone who really wants to emphasize the power of talking about mental health. And then finally, education. One of the studies that I've read, I don't know what its name. I read a lot, but one of them talked about how interactive tools like infographics can be really helpful to an audience who's not too familiar with your topic. So I imagine creating social media posts where we can have these interactive infographics, maybe explaining what services StarCare provides or explaining a little more about different diagnoses, anything like that, just to simplify and make sure that that access to care is not there. There's not a barrier because if you have access to internet, you have access to social media, then hopefully the infographic will serve as a helpful tool. So the time frame, I based this off of the fiscal year. So I kind of wanted to do it like in quarters. So based on that, each tier would be a different quarter. Tier one would focus on September to November. So really launching the campaign and making sure that our content is tailored to our audience. So if we're targeting Gen Z and Gen Alpha, a younger audience, of course, we'd want to focus on short form content. Additionally, I think we should initiate with school partnerships. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of schools within the 5 counties, and a lot of them are very rural. So, either partnering with the counselors or partnering with Region 17 so that they could distribute some digital friendly educational toolkits. Maybe talking about the best ways to talk about mental health to get those services if you need them. Tier 2, which takes place from December to February, I imagine that we could launch a testimonial mini series featuring this rural youth, our target audience, and maybe parents talking about mental health. And also, I imagine we could do something where it says myth busting, but it could be fact versus myth, talking about different items like that that relate to mental health. And this would really target those digital behaviors because it could be Instagram Reels, it could be a video, it could be an Instagram story, just anything like that. Tier three, I imagine that we could co create a short form documentary. This would be like my dream project to work on because I would love to get to work with students and then kind of ask them about their story. So I would love to create a short form documentary that we could post on our different different platforms, and then kind of launch a referral challenge. So tag someone who should see this video, tag someone who needs to hear this, that language to help our audience kind of engage and take action with our content. And then from June to August, that would be review. That would be a recap. So analyze, see what worked, see what didn't work. And hopefully, if we could do it where we could get all the counselors, get all the students together, and have an interactive kind of community report where we tell them what went well, what didn't go well, and they can tell us back. Because that way we are building that community engagement and we are talking to people who are actively promoting Start Care. So, to measure success, there's a few different things. Since the first goal was to build awareness, some metrics for awareness would be seeing an increase in followers. So, a 25% increase across our platforms would be great. That's the goal. And then also seeing how much or how many media mentions we're getting. So, are they mentioning us in local newspapers or mentioning us on the news? And then the second goal of deepening that emotional connection, which goes with engagement, metrics that go with engagement include likes, comments, shares, saves. So we really want to see a 60% increase in that within our different platforms. And then also watching the comments. A lot of time people do leave comments on our content, so seeing are they saying positive things, and hopefully that would be we'd measure and find to see if that was around 75% positive. And then the final goal, inspire behavior, change, and community involvement. That doesn't necessarily have a metric that is dealing with social media, but it is talking about taking attendance, seeing how many people are going to our events, seeing how many people we are partnering with. Has that increased? So that's an actual we would actually be taking that number, whereas the other two, we are looking strictly at our social media metrics and getting that analysis. So, to wrap up, I really want to thank you for watching this presentation, seeing it all the way through, seeing my different campaign ideas. My name is JoLina Lopez, and I'm a current mass communication graduate student, but I'm also a multimedia content creator here at Start Care Health. So I do hope that you connect with me, stay in touch. I, of course, love to see any updates that people have regarding their goals and regarding what they are going to do with their campaign. So thank you for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.